This is The Space Shot, episode 287 for February 25th, 2018. Girl in Space, my conversation with Sarah Ray Werner. I'm John Molnix. On Saturday afternoon, I sat down for a remote conversation with the creator of one of my favorite audio dramas. Here's a quick description of Girl in Space. It's a sci-fi mystery audio drama about space, science, truth, beauty, and delicious cheeses. That's the main part of today's episode, but before we dive into that, I want to mention an observatory that's related to a topic at the end of today's episode. The LIGO, or Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, studies gravitational wave astrophysics by directly detecting gravitational waves. A press release from February 11th of 2016 talks about how scientists, quote, observed ripples in the fabric of space-time. And these ripples are the gravitational waves that were generated when two black holes collided and formed one massive black hole. I'm linking to the LIGO website in the show notes, and one of those links is to a video about the observatory and gravitational wave astronomy. Space-time, gravitational waves, lasers, there's some excellent information in this video. Be sure to check it out. I've also talked about black holes in episode 244, so check it out if you're new to the podcast. Now, let's talk about Girl in Space. And before we get to my conversation with Sarah, here's the trailer for Season 1 of Girl in Space.
This probably isn't really worth noting, but during my final radiation tests of the day, I saw a blip out in the opposite direction of Rhea. It's a bright light with the pinpoint clarity of a star, but obviously it's not a star since it wasn't there yesterday. Or even a few hours ago. Also, it's moving. Charlotte's taking this new development with all the grace of a garbage fire. She barged in on her hydraulic arm while I was checking Rhea's radiation emissions earlier and started reciting the entire Caldwell Enterprises Emergency Preparedness Manual to me from start to finish. I took that to mean that she thinks the incoming light is a matter of some concern. I told her to be more optimistic, that it might not be coming directly toward us, that it could simply be a mirage, that she technically doesn't have a death to fear, but she just started reciting the manual all over again from the beginning. So I wedged a fallen tree branch up into the hydraulic tracks to block her from exiting the glass house. Season 1 of Girl in Space launches September 18th, 2017, with a new episode every 2 weeks. Subscribe using your favorite podcast app or stream episodes at girlinspacepodcast.com. It's all here in space.
Today, I'm talking with Sarah Ray Werner. She's the host of the Girl in Space podcast, as well as the Right Now podcast. I listen to both of them, so if you have your phone handy, open up your podcast app real quick and go subscribe to them because they are both really phenomenal podcasts. So, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Oh gosh, thank you. And thank you for your kind words about my shows. My gosh.
I really enjoy it. The Girl in Space, I found out about it last fall. I was I think late last fall. And I'm kind of an audio drama nut. I don't have as much time to listen to them as I would like, just because producing a podcast takes forever. Yes. But Girl in Space was really fun to listen to. And I'm looking forward to, episode 7, I think, is coming up.
Yes. And I actually have it open on my computer right now. Maybe I should close it just in case.
No worries. If it accidentally plays, we'll edit it out.
Okay.
And we don't want any spoilers.
Okay. Or maybe it'll be an accidental trailer.
Ooh, that'd be kind of cool. So talk to me about where did you get the idea for Girl in Space?
Oh my gosh. So it's kind of a long story. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay, so you mentioned a little bit earlier that my first podcast is called Right Now, and it's a show for writers. And I'm primarily a writer. I'd never really like acted or done anything with audio engineering or anything like that. And so I, of course, like many other writers, had several failed novels. And they were failed in that I failed to finish them. They weren't failed necessarily in that I tried to send them out for publishing and they got rejected, because I didn't even get that far. Because I, like many other writers, am a little bit of a perfectionist, and it never seemed good enough for me to submit to anyone. And so I started the Right Now podcast, and I was talking about writing, and I found that I really loved podcasting. And so it kind of takes the form of not really an audio diary, but maybe a little bit of a journal. So me talking with listeners about like, hey, here's some tips for if you're trying to develop a good character, or, here's some ideas if you're looking to choose an idea for your next story, that kind of stuff. And so I was like, what if I did the Right Now podcast, but the whole thing was fictional?
I like that premise.
Okay, good. And I was like, oh man, and I could be like recording from a space station. So why not set a fictional podcast in space? And then I was like, oh my gosh, that really sort of goes alongside this novel I had been playing around with, one of my failed novels. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like jump in and do this. And I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. It's not going to be a big production with a cast. It's just going to be me talking into the microphone and sort of relaying the plot of this novel. I just kind of want to see what happens if I can repurpose this thing that I wrote into something cool and new. And so I started recording it. I just sat down with the mic and started talking into it. I turned my novel into a loose sort of script. And of course, I've never written a script before, so it's not in, you see like movie scripts and they're in like the Courier font and they're specially indented and there's like 2-inch margins and whatever. No, this is just like a Word document with like with just words on it. It is. It's just words on a page. And I read them. And so that's how Girl in Space got started. I recorded the very first episode and released it. And for whatever reason, I think it's probably because I told my friends and family about it, and also my Right Now podcast listeners. It got downloaded a whole bunch of times and kind of became this hit that I was not prepared to sustain, which is delightful, right? And I feel like this is like a huge first world problem, because it's like, oh, it got too popular.
It's a good problem to have.
I feel like such a jerk saying that, but like it unexpectedly was successful. I was kind of planning on it to fail. I just kind of wanted to play around with the medium of fictional podcasting, or as I now know, they are called audio dramas. But yeah, so thank you to all you beautiful people who download my show. You've propelled me into unexpected success. I'm now on, as you said earlier, episode 7, and it has blossomed into a full cast affair. There's like 8 or 9 characters because I very quickly realized that people might get tired of just one voice aboard a spaceship talking about philosophical things and, hydroponic gardening and all of that stuff. So, and Jurassic Park, which is one of the main characters and also my favorite movies. So that's kind of how that got started. It's turned into this crazy whirlwind. And I'm really excited for the future of it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Like I'd started the 6th episode on my way to work one day, and I had to go into work, so I couldn't finish it. And then I got busy with work, and then it took me, I think, like 2 days to finish that last little spot, just because I got so busy. And it was one of those cliffhanger endings that was just kind of killer to have to like step away from the podcast. So I'm really looking forward to episode 7. So what were some of your inspirations for Girl in Space? Like, where do you take, this, I talk a lot about pop culture and sci-fi in my podcast. What are some of your inspirations for your podcast?
I love that you ask that, because, and this is something I talk about with storytelling all the time, is, everything is organic and everything builds off of what came before it.
Mhm.
And so I am a huge diehard Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan.
Okay.
And so
I've
so
never
it's like,
seen it. I feel like my nerd cred just got shot from that from admitting that.
oh, no, it's very dated. So if you like the 90s
Oh, I love the
and
90s.
big hair and okay, good, bad outfits, lots of glitter, fuzzy sweaters, it's all there. Lots of sarcasm. So I and growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch TV. And so I actually didn't really jump into pop culture until I went to college. And then I discovered all of these things that existed. And I was like, holy cow, these are my people. So I got really into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That led to me getting into Firefly, which is Joss Whedon's sort of space Western series that you might be familiar with.
Oh, definitely.
So yes, very heavily inspired by both of those. I also grew up reading. So while I couldn't watch TV or movies, I could read any book that I wanted. I could go to the library and I had carte blanche to just check out whatever. So I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy growing up. I was a huge fan of Isaac Asimov's what's the first book? Caves of Steel. Caves of Steel. Okay. Yes. And I loved the idea of I don't know, playing around with androids who look like humans and who feel and who and people who live in these new worlds that they take for granted. And I'm such a nerd, and I love that. When I saw Star Wars for the first time, I don't know. My brain exploded. So I'm very much into the original Star Wars trilogy. Let's see, what else are some of my influences? I'm sitting here like looking at my shelf, which is full of sci-fi fantasy books. The video game Myst.
Okay, yeah.
And especially Riven, the second one in the series. I love the idea of exploring beautiful places and seeing secrets and surprises sort of hidden along the way. This is maybe not what you expected when you asked for my.
No, that's great. That's great. Like the older video games, especially with Myst, it's been forever since I've played that, but I get where you're coming from on that. It is just kind of exploring and trying to unlock secrets. I dig that because I feel like a lot of the plot of Girl in Space revolves around exploring those, secrets and finding out about the past. And I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of themes that are similar. So I dig that.
Thank you. And that's how I wanted the sort of the revelation of the Girl in Space plot to be, like you're moving through Myst or Riven or one of those sort of point and click 90s adventure games that I love so much. Let's see. And I guess I can't forget one of the biggest inspirations, and that was Jurassic Park. The movie is so, and this is going to sound stupid because I know it's like a thriller, but like it's so beautifully written. It's so perfectly staged, and it raises some, I don't know, I think very poignant philosophical questions about creating life and who has the right to decide what lives and what dies. And so those themes are somewhat prominent in the first half of the first season of Girl in Space and will become much more so as the season continues. So
that sounds exciting.
It's very exciting. And that is my very, very long-winded answer to you.
No, that's good. And Jurassic Park, I mean, like Michael Crichton, growing up as a kid, I think I've read almost all of his books, I think. And I really like where he goes with like science and like, especially like genetics and everything. And like Westworld. Yes. Have you seen Westworld yet? I
have.
Okay. What do you think about that then? Because that kind of ties into some similar themes of Jurassic Park.
It absolutely does. And I wonder, I'm trying to remember when I saw Westworld, if I saw it before I started writing Girl. I think I saw it after I started writing Girl in Space, but it really captured me. What's the main character's name? Not Doris.
Dolores.
Dolores, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Good grief. I was really drawn in by her character and deeply, deeply disturbingly moved by how people treat one another when they don't believe they're 100% human. And that definitely comes out in the plot of Girl in Space, which deals with a couple things thematically related to that. And that is what really makes us human. and as human, we're supposed to be supposed to be herd animals. We're supposed to be in community with each other. And what happens if we're not? What does that do to our humanity? And then what does it mean when we relate to each other in hierarchy? I mean, all of this is just very deeply interesting to me. Who decides who has power and who doesn't? Who decides who is real and who's not? And what does it mean to be an entity owned by something or someone else? And so these are all themes that kind of really, really resonate in Westworld as well, that I really am interested in.
And I think it's kind of an interesting time to be thinking about that type of question, just because where things are going with, I mean, who knows how close we are to AI, but
oh gosh,
what really constitutes intelligence or a life form? It's really,
yeah.
It's kind of one of those questions that I don't think everybody's going to be prepared for the answer once it's actually happening. So it's an interesting thing, and it's a timely question to be asking as well. So
yeah, one of the things I talk about in the upcoming episode 7 is what makes an artificial intelligence artificial? Like, how do you know when it's no longer artificial? When does it come into its own? It's that to me is deeply interesting.
What are your characters with, him being, part mechanical, I guess, part biological? Is that accurate?
Yes.
That's how I've always just like kind of imagined him. Kind of like, this is off topic, but have you seen the new Star Trek Discovery yet?
I have not.
There's a character in it that's apparently human, but she's like super mechanical.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of what I was imagining him being like, is kind of, he's got a lot of biological, but also just, pieces of metal, like implants, all that, just different.
Yeah.
I don't know. You should really check it out, because I thought it was an interesting thing to have a human that looked more like Data than an actual human.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that.
So yeah, I mean, like, just the nature of artificial life forms. That's something I think I've talked about it in a previous episode, or I might be talking about it here in the future. But there's an episode of Star Trek where Data goes on trial, and they try to figure out what makes him a being, like an individual, and if he is the property of the state versus an actual sovereign being. So I think that's a cool theme that you're exploring too in Girl in Space. So
thank you.
So going forward with the podcast, no spoilers or anything, but where do you see yourself taking the story?
Gosh, what a good question. One of the reasons I love sci-fi so much is just the endless possibility. So, romances are kind of locked into their genre. Mysteries are kind of locked into whodunit, and then, the solution. Sci-fi can go anywhere. Anywhere. Yeah. And I simultaneously love that and am extremely intimidated by it, because of course I want to take the story in a whole new direction that nobody's ever seen before. But, in order to know whether you've done that, you have to read like every book ever written, and that's just not possible. So, but what I want to do is take it from its initial roots, which was just a girl recording an audio diary in space, and, talk about things that are important and that are ultimately uplifting. There's enough negativity in the world. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I want my contribution to be warm-hearted and uplifting, as naive as that sounds. I got a little tired of the doom and gloom of like Game of Thrones and stuff, and just had to stop reading and watching. And so I want to kind of do the opposite of that. I would like this to sprawl outward. Currently, it's sort of like a bottle episode, which in television means that all the characters are sort of like trapped in one place, and there's really no change of scenery. So I'd like to break free of that eventually, and really explore what's possible for my characters. If you're a fan of the show, there is a reason why the main character potentially cannot leave her space station. Yes. But I want to explore what happens with that. So I guess what I'm saying is give it a listen, stay tuned, and hopefully it will not terribly disappoint you.
Oh, definitely not. It's for anybody that's listening, if you've never even tried an audio drama podcast before, if you've never listened to one, this would be a good place to start, just because, I mean, there's 6 episodes. You can get into it quick. It's, you're not going to be catching up on 50 or 100 episodes to get current. So I think it's a really cool place to start.
Well, thank you.
One of the other things that I like to ask people too is just, do you have anything favorite for, space or science that you would like to talk about or you would like to know more about? If you've got a question for me, if I could, research it and get back to you, if I don't know the answer off the top of my head, do you have anything else?
Oh, kind of. I don't want to make you like my researcher, but like I'm really interested in gravitational waves and what they do with time as you approach large bodies in space. That to me is extremely fascinating. It's something that I don't know a whole lot about. I was one of those people who I was an English major, and I acted like an English major even back in high school. And so, of course, I was stupid and I didn't take physics or anything that I am now as an adult interested in. So I'm really regretting not knowing the fundamentals and the basics of how things work there. So I don't know. Maybe,
I could give you a book recommendation, I think.
Please do.
I've got to look over at my shelf here real quick. That was the one thing about moving is too many books.
Oh, never too many books, but I totally understand. They will break your back.
Yeah, exactly. It's a book actually by Kip Thorne, and it is called Black Holes and Time Warps.
Oh, perfect.
And I've read bits and pieces of it over the years. It's one of those things that you pick it up and it's like, holy shnikes, this is some pretty heady stuff. And then I, get busy with other things and I put it down and I'll get back to it eventually. It's one of those type of books, but it's really interesting. He was actually the guy that the movie Interstellar.
Yeah.
I think he did all of the consulting for that movie.
Oh my gosh.
So it's an interesting book. I think he's also got a newer one out. The book I've got is an older one that I snagged off Amazon for a couple bucks. So.
Oh, gotcha. So it's like a revised edition.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually a whole new book.
Gasp.
But yeah, I think it's a little bit shorter on the next one. I want to say it's like The Science of Interstellar or something like that.
That sounds amazing and right up my alley.
Yeah, you should definitely check it out then. It's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. History, I focus a little bit more on that, but the science stuff, there's so much to learn for that.
Gosh. Yes.
And that's one of the things I've noticed as I've been talking with people. Like just a few weeks ago, I interviewed 2 of the scientists on the New Horizons mission.
Oh, wow.
And I went back and was listening to that episode, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many more questions I have now that I have those answers that we just didn't have time for. So I get where you're coming from on that. There's so many things to know and I want to know them, but
that to me, that's the most beautiful thing about life. Like, seriously, the fact that we'll never stop learning about it. Like, that's so inspiring.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. It's trippy to think about too, just because there's so many things we've yet to discover. And, especially with astronomy, the more answers we have, the weirder the questions get.
Which is beautiful.
It is.
It's like so exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting time to be alive. Everybody's always saying that, the dawn of the space race was the coolest time just because you had Mercury and Gemini and the Apollo missions. But what we're doing now, there might not be humans exploring deep space, but some of the things that we're finding out from robotic missions are just as incredible, if not more so.
Agree. Yes.
Well, Sarah, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I appreciate you taking the time. And again, everybody, go download Girl in Space and the Right Now podcast. I'll be linking to those in the show notes.
You are wonderful.
Thanks for coming on, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, John. This has just been a delight. I appreciate it so much.
I hope we can do it again in the future.
Me too.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'd really appreciate it if you could venture into the Apple Podcasts app or your podcast app of choice and leave a review for The Space Shot. I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take just a minute of your time to leave a review, since more reviews help more people find the space shot. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or click the link in the show notes and you'll find me. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.